Hello, everybody, and welcome to Best in the West episode number 4, where a veteran and I, Tom Mathiessen, are going to discuss all the games, or not all the games probably, but all the teams that have been playing in the LEC in the summer split in week 3, just to make it more convenient. Episode 4 of Best in the West, week 3 of the LEC. Veteran, it was a week in which the standings got shaken up quite nicely, where we have many ties. How do you feel about it?
I mean, the progress of Misfits is definitely or I'm not even sure if it's progress. They kind of regress, but by regressing, they are winning again, and I like that. But overall, I mean, I definitely did not expect the performances we saw in week 1 to continue to be like the standings that we get by this point.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely there are teams I think that if they make playoffs, they could make a fairly deep run in spite of their current results.
Yeah.
So generally things fluctuating now it never really excites me. It's like, oh, I guess just like another another LEC split, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, when it comes to the lower teams, that's the most interesting part for me.
Yeah, well,
So.
like the main like question I want to answer kind of in this episode is because we have all these ties, and I'm just gonna read out the standings. We have Exile and Fnatic at 5 and 2, shared first place, and Rogues there as well with 5 and 2 score. Then we have G2, Mad Lions, Team Vitality all at 4 and 3. Then Astralis and Misfits at 3 and 4, and SK and BDS are at the bottom at 1 and 6. But particularly like the top 8 is relatively close within each other, and I've seen people argue online. Oh, this is so good. The LEC is super competitive. Where in the back of my mind, it's like, yeah, but what if they're all shit? You know, it can.
I mean,
so it's like the LEC is super competitive, which is good. Like they're gonna try to become better all the time. But are they all actually good? Are they all shit? It's probably somewhere in between. But at this point, like, yeah, it's good that it's competitive. But I'm not gonna draw any conclusion yet about the quality that we're gonna deliver.
I've always been of the opinion that a top-heavy region is the strongest region. So a region where you have someone just completely dominating, like SKT have done in the past, or Damwon, or G2 2019, right? Fnatic in 2016. That's generally when I think a region is strongest. The reason being that if there is a team, Flash Wolves is a really good example of that, I think, because there was basically no real competition for them for ages, but they could take, you know, Korean teams and stuff like this. If you have a team like that, that means someone in the league has figured out something, right, that the rest of them aren't privy to, right? There's some kind of evolution being made there. And given that some kind of evolution's being made there, if I then look at a close region, right, where anyone could win, and no one's made an evolution there, it's much more likely that the other region simply has a team that's also figured out what they haven't figured out, than all 10 teams there have also figured this thing out, and no one in Europe has watched them and figured that out except for this one team, you know? And indeed with Flash Wolves, a lot of people don't know this, we actually got a lot of our understanding of the concept of tempo from Flash Wolves. G2 heavily scrimming them at an IEM back in, I believe it was 2017, 2018, taught them that what Flash Wolves are playing for in their very famous early game wasn't that they were playing for objectives or towers or even kills. They were playing for resets.
Yeah.
And Miffy was like mind blown by that. And he started yelling about it to anyone who would listen to him. And that's where he actually got a concept of tempo. They'd figured that out. That was also their advantage against the Korean teams and why they were able to beat them so consistently. So yeah, like when I look at this, and I especially, like, no offense to them, I was praising them a lot last time, but like I see Excel up there.
Yeah.
It's like these are pretty binary teams, all with flaws, and no one has figured out like it. You know, no one's reached the next stage of league. And odds on, if I just see a standing like this, I'll always assume that's the case as well.
Yeah.
So
well, that's the thing, like, because in Spring Split and in previous splits, it used to be Rogue who had it figured out, right? And that was kind of the team that was like, okay, they know the meta, they know exactly which champions to play in order to win. And then other teams would catch up, and then in playoffs performances they would have figured it out and were able to shift more between the options that there were in the meta, which Rogue not always seem to be aware of, because they had limited themselves a bit. But I think it's good to see like it's competitive from an entertainment point of view. I do agree with you. Like if one team stands out above the rest, then the other teams are gonna want to catch up to them. They're gonna look like, okay, what are they doing, and how can we execute a similar strategy that fits our style more, or fits how we think about the game. I will say that I hope for the longevity in the LEC, that it's not just going to be because it's so competitive. There's a bunch of teams that are going to be very upset that they're not making Worlds, for example. I just hope with the that it's pretty dense in talent now. I think the top in terms of we have very good players in all these teams that are very competitive. I hope that these teams aren't going to think, well, we invested a lot, it didn't work out. We're going to go back to like the rookie roulette in the LEC of seeing what cheap options takes and maybe develop some new talents, but that is a problem for next year. Talking about the games overall, it's been a pretty interesting week. I think teams like Mad Lions went 1-1, Xerxe went 1-1, G2 0-2. We saw on the other hand, we saw Fnatic go 2-0, Vitality 2-0. So these teams that were previously thought of, okay, they're going to be at the top, suffered some losses, whereas teams that were struggling actually managed to get some wins. And is there any team in particular you want to get us started off with?
I mean, I guess most prescient for me, I'd prefer to talk about Misfits because they actually had a 2-0 week after having a lot of issues, and one of those was against Mad Lions.
Yep.
Yeah. And in the previous weeks, my biggest complaint about them is that ever since playoffs, they'd had this kind of delusion, right? Where they didn't realize or didn't want to accept or acknowledge that their early game was always shit, you know? Like we talk a lot about the early game issues that they had in week 1 and week 2, but those issues always existed. Just people didn't think about them because when they thought about them, they'd think about like Akali triple kills in team fights without remembering, you know, that the whole map's just been decimated for ages before we got to that point.
Yeah.
Jinx, heavy team fight carrying, right? Stuff like this. And when it came to playoffs in spring, they switched to like Xayah poke comps, you know, mid-game champions for mid-game compositions. With no late game insurance, and these guys didn't just need late game insurance. Late game was basically everything for them. But now we come in, and I believe they played on both games, so Relevant is on 4K HP duty from now on.
Yeah, they played Orton against BDS, and let's see, we had Magic 2. Where are they here? Oh yeah, they also played Orn against Matt. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and they played Xerxe bot lane in the Mad Lions game, and they played Corki mid lane in the BDS game. So two things I really liked about them is, one, obviously I really like that they are leaning more to late game compositions. Yes, they picked Lee. Yes, they picked Ari, but these are still ultimately late game compositions with a lot to work with on team fights. These are very easy team fight compositions, if anything. And I normally despise first pick Corki, as anyone who's watched my stream knows, but Misfits are going to be losing early game no matter what, right? So if Corki's getting shafted in lane, as I remember he was, though I also remember he did like longsword 3 pots into a corrupting pot star Ari, so yeah, you're going to be at a point against that, and then you're just going to get shut perma, but whatever, I guess we're just accepting we don't give a fuck about early game anymore. It's working though. Like they reached the later stage, and against Mad Lions, I guess I'm talking specifically here, they reach team fight stages, and Irrelevant is actually showing to be a third threat, because we're used to seeing VTO. I remember on the RE against Mad, he was able to get some really nice flanks towards the start of fights. Neon, you can basically always expect to play insanely well in all of these fights, as aggressive as is possible to be. But there were also a lot of fights where Irrelevant was the one kicking it off and getting the picks, and that was really, really good to see from them. And Mercer had a really, really good Renata game as well.
Yeah.
In the game against BDS, we actually got to see what an early game plan from Misfits would look like if the enemy decided not to do anything.
Yeah, exactly. That was what I was going to say, because we saw BDS or Misfits, I mean, indeed play more towards like late game in terms of how they were drafting and what they were trying to
Yeah.
do. But in the early game, they had very
Yes.
little to say in these games because against BDS, they tried to gank bot to put pressure, but it didn't work. Then Misfits started a Drake, and BDS just walks in and takes the Drake. Misfits tries to go to the Herald. And they do kill Syncroft on their way there, but they don't get any help with the Herald because BDS managed to crash the wave, so BDS just walks up and takes the Herald. And then in the late game, yes, they do come online, and it was a big problem, especially with BDS. I think they didn't have any disengage from what Misfits composition. But I still thought in these early games, like, man, I see what you're trying to do, Misfits, but you're not in control of this game. And even against Mad Lions was dictating the pace of the game in that early game.
I respectfully disagree that Slatten did not put pressure bot lane, actually.
No, I said he did put pressure bot lane, but it didn't.
Oh, I thought you said he tried, but it didn't work.
No, I mean he did. It didn't amount to anything because they weren't able to like leverage that into the Drake that they were trying to do.
I disagree, and I will show you why I disagree.
Sure.
If you pull up the screen.
Hell yes.
So yes, so let's look at these compositions, all right? So I actually saw a really similar instance, or a similar instance where I think you should try something like this in Prime League yesterday in Gamer Legion versus Mouse Sports. So if you want to see an example of what happens if you don't do this, go watch that game. But here you basically have Corki Kaiser Nautilus into Ari Ezreal Karma, right? With the composition on the right, Shinkrov's going to most likely do top to bot. There's no reason for him to move top side. Gangplank can play that lane out himself, and there's not going to be any kill threat on there. Bot side's going to have very, very heavy priorities, and there's a potential for kill threat from Neon Mercer on level 2-3. If you path down there and Mattia don't just push, which Ezreal Khan's obviously going to do, they're just going to like perma push, right? Then you're going to freely get your scuttle, right? Now, off of that push on the first 3 waves, Ezreal and Karma are going to get first reset, and Karma's going to be able to influence midsection off that. And mid's already at a severe disadvantage by being a longsword 3-pot Corki into corrupting pot Ari. So mid's going to end up losing out, right? Very heavily. You'll end up in a scenario where you don't win either of these 2 lanes, and then it's going to be very difficult for top to maintain any pressure, so now jungle can get threatened. Basically, you're at risk of a situation here where you could end up with 3 losing lanes. You almost definitely end up with 2 losing lanes of this, and you almost definitely don't get resets on your champions and are at a severe disadvantage. If BDS are able to accelerate the game like this, BDS can win. If BDS can't accelerate the game like this, then team on the left with the Corki and the Kaiser and the full team fight comp actually have a really good shot at winning the game, right? So, with this in mind, how do you stop this setup? Shinkov's already going top to bottom. We already know Karma Ezreal are going to be able to push. This is what you do. Given that Schlatten's going to lose a quadrant to the jungle on the second rotations if you don't do this anyway, you hard leash for Schlatten, and you have him go and gank early. And then you see right now, Mattia, Dote, they're getting pressure, they're getting priority, as they should, and they think Wukong's going bot to top on full clear.
Yeah.
But instead, Wukong does this. Do it. Okay, well, I skipped it. There you go. So they burn Flash on a Dote. They actually kill him as well. And now, Mercer and Neon get priority. They're able to hook Matty, but that ultimately doesn't really do anything here. Now, off of this, Nautilus is able to move midsection and relieve pressure there as well. Whereas we would see the exact opposite if they didn't do this. Yeah. Corki would have no help whatsoever, and it would be over for him.
Yes.
But because of this, they're actually able to set up the map early in a way where they can actually scale.
Yeah, I mean, like what I was saying is that this was like a successful way of applying pressure, but they weren't able to maintain that because they, as I said, if you go later to the first Drake that's been done, Misfits walk up there, but because BDS has reclaimed control, BDS can literally walk up there and just say, "Oh, thanks for the leash," and get the Drake. So I do agree that this was a very very good thing to see. But what I was more trying to say is that in terms of maintaining that pressure, you see what happens here. BDS just walks up.
Yeah, I see what happens here. The reason this happens is because VTO stays on 0 mana and doesn't reset before it, whereas he had the opportunity to do so. He definitely could have if they want to play hard for it. Otherwise, I think Wukong should just clear. Like, this is a mistake by mid-jungle for sure, but this isn't it isn't that they didn't get anything off of it. Getting Kai'Sa and Nautilus on reset here before Ezreal Karma was really big. I think they should just give up Drake here and have Wukong move topside, or maybe defend of a potential dive bot, but that's unlikely to happen here because you have the Dirk on Kai'Sa now, and you only have Tyr on Ezreal. That dive bot's not really going to amount to anything. So I think here you can just play out the game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the Drake shows that they didn't get anything off it. They're not planning to get Drake from this, at least I don't think they should be trying to do so. And if they really wanted this, they could have just had Corki reset and TP back, but I don't ultimately think that would have been worth anyway.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
what about the Herald then, which happens a bit later, where Misfits try to go to Herald, but BDS has been able to crash their waves and is able to walk up, and Misfits doesn't get any help. I don't know exactly what point this happens at, but we do see. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I mean, Misfits are actually first on.
Mm-hmm.
With pressure on bot side. Misfits are... Okay, VTO just face checks into Shinkrov and gets chunked to like 2 HP. Oh yeah, I remember this engage. Yeah. Then they're able to kill Shinkrov off of this. But because VTO face checks and drops all his HP, he's not joining him, and Mercer has to stay to help to make sure that VTO can get reset here. He also has really low mana, so he can't join the fight. So there isn't enough damage on the Herald and the Dote and Arya moving in. But this is like individual mistakes, right? This isn't like the early pressure did nothing. The early pressure is not supposed to snowball into these neutrals anyway. I don't think they need to worry about these neutrals with the way that they want to play, right? I'm really worried now that you're going to ask me another thing. It's going to be like, oh, VTO entered again. And they'll just look like I'm flaming it.
No. I was thinking it, but deliberately didn't say it because I'm not sure what the communication was like between him and maybe it was a call like, I need you to stay in lane or something like this. So yeah.
Yeah, there are like other ways for them to play this, right? Mm-hmm. So like ultimately they have full numbers around midsection for this. Schlatten moves towards mid, but then instead of moving through the lane, he moves towards river first. What they could do is that like you just have Mercer and Schlatten face check this instead of VTO, right? You already have Irrelevant moving down.
Yeah.
You can play this relatively risk-free and just move him through. Like, but there isn't really a reason for VTO to be the one to face check this.
Yeah.
I think they just assumed that Schlatten would have seen Shinkrov if he's moving in here. Shinkrov can't be here at all. But Shinkrov finding that window is the only reason that they're able to grab Herald. Even if he dies, actually. Like, that move's really nice. There are other ways for them to set that up. They actually have the pressure and the priority to get the Herald. It's just mistakes that... And these individual mistakes are really why Misfits aren't good early. They normally actually have the ability to make a good play, and then just individually cock it up.
Right.
You know, be it a comms thing, or however nice you want to be to the individual players of Misfits. So, for whatever reason, they keep cocking it up.
Yeah. So because what we've said in previous weeks is that Misfits didn't seem to have a plan, or at least a plan that they had wasn't working. You're now saying, okay, we're seeing kind of the foundation of how this team is able to function as a 5-man unit. It's just that as individuals, and there's like rough edges that need to be polished because these mistakes, these individual mistakes against like an in shape, because I don't want to say better teams because they also beat Mad Lions eventually, but like I would be inclined to think like against an Excel who are far more rigid in how they can play. Yeah, go ahead.
We can definitely say better early game teams.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, what I will say is that the addition here is that they're actually making a game plan to unlock bot lane earlier, right? That's something that they didn't really try to do before. That's a jungle bot lane thing. And that the issues we were talking about beforehand, it's like you can't really get to a point where you can execute a plan if you're mid-jungle 2v2 or just dying randomly, right? So that would be more it. This is... Like, I prefaced this whole section with, we finally got to see what an early game plan for Misfits would look like if the enemy team doesn't do anything, you know? Like, they did something level 1, level 2, and Shinkov was obviously still clearing at that point, and then Shinkov's still playing reactive to it, but Shinkov's reaction's actually quite nice anyway. But this is the first time we've seen an enemy team have to play reactive to Misfits, but it is BDS, you know? BDS didn't have a good week at all. And... Yeah, like I don't get to say any of this for Mad Lions, right? Like it wasn't the same thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, how do you feel about Misfits' game against Mad Lions then? Because that was a certified banger in terms of the game itself. It was a very tense game, at least from watching the studio as well. People were very excited
Yeah.
for this game. Um, it also had Mad Lions felt like mostly dictating the pace early on.
Yes.
But Misfits, because they were playing so heavily for Drakes, then eventually getting to a soul point and then getting a Mad Lions in a team fight, getting that soul, what pushed them over the edge.
I mean, those kinds of games where it becomes about engages on overextensions, which is ultimately what that turned into.
Mm-hmm.
Mad Lions didn't seem to respect the overextension, the engage from Misfits, and kept overextending into them on lanes on the towers, and didn't seem to respect their amount of control in team fights. Like I've already praised individually most of the members, basically all except Schlatten on Misfits for that game, for various things they were doing in fights.
Yeah.
But those games are ultimately a lot less interesting to me. What was more interesting to me about Mad wasn't exclusive to the Misfits game, just how often they seem to open through midsection and how dedicated they are to transferring any pressure they get on midsection into anything, be it like shallow jungle control, river control, into obviously full leans on dives later, but they always, on every push, seem to try to get something. There's never a time where they push and they use that push to leverage more economy. They always seem to feel like they're able to spike in the next 2 rotations, watching Mad Lions. But that's not exclusive to the Misfits game. Yeah. When it's like a full team fight fiesta like that, for me personally as an analyst, there's just less to talk about,
Yeah. Who can press buttons better, I guess, in such a scenario.
I mean, great. I learned that Neon is insane at the game and VTO is a great team fighter. And it's like, I haven't learned anything, except maybe that Irrelevant can definitely hang with these guys. That's really good to know. And Mercer, because last split, Mercer was a guy where I like to describe him as being like 3 seconds late. So there were a lot of roams he did that I was thinking, great, other supports aren't even trying these roams, but you're like 3 seconds late and you're throwing your engage 3 seconds too fast so no one else can follow up on it, something like this.
Yeah.
He's no longer 3 seconds late, especially in that game, right? So that's really good improvement from Mercer. But other than that, I can't really say anything. Though, having like 50 team fights in the game is a good way to tell if a player is getting, better on those kinds of timings, right? That's a good way of knowing.
Yeah. But did you have any other thoughts about Misfits then? Because it seemed, I think...
Stick with the late game stuff for the love of God.
Yeah.
Like, holy shit. And if you're scared to do Yuumi yourself, first game
they banned
BDS banned
Mad
Yuumi.
Lions.
Yeah. And second game they banned Yuumi.
Yeah.
Like for this kind of style of play, especially if Mercy's no longer going to be 3 seconds behind or ahead, right? Feel free to leave Yuumi up and go Sona, because if you're just a full team fighting team and you're leaning into that, Sona destroys Yuumi. She gets full free scaling against her, and then with her shields and heals and buffs later, she just outscales the fuck out of Yuumi, who is basically single target versus Sona's heavy AoE.
Yeah.
And with the comps that they are running, Sona would be pretty much perfect.
That was what
right?
I was gonna ask, because obviously Sona and Yuumi have different synergies with champions that they want to play, but Sona would fit what Misfits likes to play as well there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like with the Kai'Sa and Xerxe, Neon's going to be diving a decent amount, but you can also play Xerxe without that. For the rest of the champions, though, especially like Sona being attached to Ornn or something, or the Corki, right? All stuff like this. It's really nuts, to be honest. Like Sona would be really good for their comps, and I think they should look into that.
But I think that maybe for Misfits, if they want to play a Kai'Sa and a Xerxe, where we have seen Neon playing pretty aggressively with those champions as well. Maybe that is something that stylistically they're not quote unquote ready for in experimenting, and they'd rather just keep it to this and perfect this before trying anything experimental, because this is a team that heading into the split had a lot of troubles and now is finally finding their footing a bit.
Sure. I would also say Sona has decent secondary engage as well, because they have their primary done with Ornn. And Renata is basically being used as secondary or as disengaged, and Sona can fulfill those functions. So I don't think it would be like too dramatic a change in playstyle.
Yeah.
But yeah, like if these champs are just heavy working for them and they just want to stick with this and the very small variations without going straight into like Yuumi, Sona, Enchanter meta, fair enough. Yeah, just keep going for that. I'm just really glad they're not being delusional anymore, you know?
Yeah. For me, like seeing Misfits go 2-0 is just such a good sign, because I did the interview with Neon after the second week where they got their first win. And he was saying, like, yeah, I don't know, I don't feel too good about this yet, because, well, it was SK, and it's not really a team, you know, that makes me too happy if we win against them. But now, they also beat Mad Lions, which is a team that absolutely should make you happy winning against. And I think, as I said last week, where I hope that Misfits would get that motivational boost from getting its first win, well, if they did anything like that after that way, then this surely will give them a motivation. It's a bit of a bummer that now the LEC is going to be on like a 1 week break, so they might.
God, they are actually
slow down. Yeah. There's no show next week, so it's that's a bit of a bummer for them. It's going to take some momentum out of that, but. All in all, still, you know, you at least end that first. It's not even a half. They ended after 3 weeks, but like that first third on a high note, and that's pretty important, I would say.
Fine. It's enough time for Irrelevant to learn more than just Ornn, because I'm thinking, shit, 1 week might actually be enough time for teams to figure out they should just ban Ornn. Because I don't know a little about that, you know. It's not like we've seen them play Sion, etc. It's not like Irrelevant was known for his tank play in the LFL. He was known for like flanking 5 people in action and making it look good, you know, this kind of stuff. That's the kind of play it was. So I'm interested in that. I'm happy for Neon that he finally gets wins he can feel proud of. He's right, like they have better players than this. They've just never figured it out early, you know. And you know what? I honestly think it's fine if you're a late game team. If you have style that works for you, great, brilliant. Fuck it, one trick it. Why not?
I mean, you know, OG Rogue is the scaling team, you know, where they would have 35 to 40 minute games and would just always scale and they would win. That's how they started out, and then later they became the early game team. But whatever, it is, if it's working for them, keep at it. It's just, I wonder indeed as well, what are they going to pivot to if teams start banning Ornn? There are not, I guess, many champions that do something similar where they can also help the entire team. Maybe they'll shift. I don't know.
I mean, Ornn's
champion would be.
I mean, he's played Sedge, right?
Yeah, fucking Sedge.
But Ornn has like a specific level of really safe control that you don't get with a lot of other champions. Especially like I thought he was really undervalued last split, and then G2 figured out how broken Ornn is in their last few games, right? Because last split, it was just all low mobility carries. Like you have to burn flash when you hit wom wom from Ornn. But now you actually do have the options of Ezreal, Ari, blah 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 blah. So it's a bit less so. But still, I think it's a really safe engage and disengage and everything, you know.
So far, I mean, he's played obviously not many games this split, but he's played Gnar twice, then Xerxe and Sejuani. Those were all losses, and then all the 3 wins are on Ornn. So we'll see what else he has up his sleeve. I see in his other histories, like played Renekton, which is getting a buff, I think. So that might be.
Just very different champion, right? That's like a pick base, like Sejuani's the closest that he has actually been playing recently. Mundo's so fucking different. I mean, is he still be in the 4K HP gang, I guess?
Exactly, right? That's all that matters. Just, can't kill me if I have too much health, though.
And Gnar doesn't count. Like, Gnar is the carries, I guess I can play one tank, Luxnar. Builds like Trinity Force. I mean, The most interesting thing in all the Misfits games was how Mad Lions is playing into them, because how Mad Lions is playing in general is quite interesting to me. Like the way
Yeah,
that
I
they
mean,
look.
we can shift over to discussing Mad Lions.
Yeah,
Why not? Because
like
they played against G2 and Misfits, and when 1-on-1 they beat G2, and then
yeah.
lost to Misfits, which is probably the inverse of what people would have expected heading into the heading into the weekend. It's
Well,
interesting.
it's all about AD carry diff. That's what you have to understand. Okay.
Oh my god. 20 ADCs you would have put in there before Flacket, right? No,
Unforgiven beats Flackid. Makes sense.
oh my
Neon
god.
beats Unforgiven.
Any
Makes sense. You know.
anyway, anyway, so what you were saying earlier, in the game against Misfits, that Mad Lions was playing around mid a lot, and actually in
Yes.
my notes against the ones against G2, it was
Yes.
first. Because first it was a bit messy. I think like G2 tried to do something bot. Med wasn't sure what to do. But then I noticed like they started pressuring BB first on top a lot until that lane was relatively safe. And then they transitioned that pressure in just completely shutting down Caps, who couldn't play the game anymore. And even when he couldn't play the game anymore, was still able to get like that very impressive 1v2 kill with the Zoe. But it started for me with Matt actually shutting down BB top, because G2 likes to play towards top a lot as well, and then transitioning that into shutting down Caps, which was a very good plan, because they just realized, okay, this is how G2 wants to play the game. They saw Caps trying to do dirty things on Zoe, and they said, okay, well, now you just can't play the game anymore.
Well, so I agree with you that they targeted Broken Blade first.
Yeah.
I don't think that was necessarily a game plan, though, because you wouldn't pick Arm at Gangplank. I think what happened was Broken Blade burned Flash level 1. And so, because of this, they abused the flashless lane. Bot was able to just win 2v2.
Yeah.
But it's also very difficult to gank a Xerxe lane, right? Compared to a flashless Aatrox. So I think they played to where they were given their advantages early.
Yeah.
And so in a way, you could say they were playing reactive to that. Though I still ultimately think it was good that they did. Playing 2 a GP isn't necessarily something I like doing. But once GP is 6, they start playing not necessarily to their Twitch, but they play to unlock their Twitch to go mid. And I really liked those mid leans from Twitch and the way that they were doing those. That was really nice to me, though it took a bit for them to get started on it. When they did get started on it, I really enjoyed watching it. There was a player back in season 4 called Tabs. And Tabs was the AD carry for Alliance.
Mm-hmm.
If you were you even around back then?
No, I wasn't around, but I know of him because he's Dutch, I think. So I've heard of the guy, yeah.
So I used to talk about like 3 kinds of ADCs way back then. I really don't want to think about how long ago that was, because I already feel old. And one was the like team fighting scaling ADC, and that was Reckless. And one was the turret destroying tempo ADC, who was basically a sentry turret, and that was like Forgiven was the apex of that.
Sure.
And the third kind was the guy who knew his support was dog shit and basically played the map, right? He played the map. He was like a utility AD carry, you could say, right? But it's not just that he picks like Ashe, Varus, all this shit. It's that he actually plays off his priority to snowball other lanes. He plays like a support probably would. And in Europe, the apex of that was Tabs. This is why Alliance suffered so much when they grabbed Reckless, because what was happening in their games is Tabs would get far ahead on something like Cogmore or Twitch, and he would always translate that into mid lane and unlock Froggen's resets, and they'd have priorities on their first contests because Tabs would shift his priorities into mid and to top. And when they got Reckless, they no longer had someone who was shifting priorities, so they just lost priorities all lanes, you know? And they were behind and they couldn't enter first and blah, blah, blah. That's what Tabs gave them. When I see Twitch back in play, Kobe, I believe, also played it. I instantly think about this because Twitch is quite unique in the level of pressure that he can give on these recalls, right? He can just turn up invisible in lane.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't see anything there, he can leave lane before he's spotted, and the enemy that can't just play with knowing that he went for like a mid roam and it didn't work out or something, right? And Unforgiven definitely understood that. especially post first item. He was playing very heavy for the pressure on midsection, and given that Mad are playing for heavy midsection pressure, not like in lane super early game, but throughout the mid-late game, seeing how they use Twitch there, it's like, yeah, this is actually the perfect champion for them, right? If they want to keep playing these groupings. Because they'll just shove everyone through mid and then drop them off, right? It's a safe way to play. You don't have to do it on every wave, although some teams historically have. You don't have to, but it is probably the safest way to maintain a map state and to prevent leads from the opponent, and then just keep playing to abuse mistakes. And that's what they're doing, and I love the Twitch for that. I love what Unforgiven did with the Twitch for that. And it's why they seem like such a better team now. The other guy I'd praise, first off, they're all doing well. But the other guy that I'd praise would be Elyoya, because I thought Elyoya's parving is like, especially when I watched how Malong played on Rogue this weekend, and then watch Elyoya, it's like night and day, and Elyoya is so consistent on the areas where Malong wasn't. That it's like, I think Elyoya right now is the best jungler. But it's like, Shinkrov will sometimes do things on review where it's like, okay, this was actually a really good plan, you know? Yeah. So it's like those two are it for me, and Elyoya is absurdly consistent, and I'm glad that they have an identity going later into the game, which I still think is on Nisqy, and I think now it's confirmed, right? They're talking about it quite openly.
Yeah, I mean, they're saying like Elyoya is still the main shot caller on the team. They discussed.
Okay.
I think there's some broadcast that like Elyoya still says, okay, I'm still like the main shot caller, but it's more that Nisqy will provide his inputs. You said because I was
gonna say, because when watching the mic check, Nisqy was just non-stop talking.
Yeah, but it's interesting because the team might have a different perspective, but maybe it's just like Elyoya says like, this is what we're gonna do. And then Nisqy gets them there or something, like where it's like Elyoya is the captain and Nisqy is like the manager, and he says like, okay, the boss says this is what we're gonna do, so you're gonna go there, and you're gonna go there, and you're gonna go there, something like this. That might be the hierarchy in place there.
Did you ever watch The Simpsons?
I mean, there's so many episodes of The Simpsons I've watched.
Did you watch the baseball episode?
No,
the
baseball episode. I don't know.
Where they got all of like the big baseball players and Mr. Burns hired all of them.
No.
Someone, okay, I guarantee you people watching will remember this, okay? Sure. But there's a point where like he has Darryl Strawberry, who's like some massive baseball superstar in his team, right? And he's like, Darryl, hit a home run. And Darryl's like, you got it, Mr. B. And he just like wonks it out the whole thing. And Mr. Bent is like, I told him to do that.
Yeah.
Imagining Elyoya being like, guys, we should get Baron. And Nisqy's like, okay, here's how we're going to do it. Blah, 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 blah. And then they get Baron, and Elyoya's like, I'm such a good shot caller.
Head into the game, like, guys, okay, this is the game plan. This is how we're going to win this. We destroy their nexus. Brilliant. Yeah. Brilliant. Amazing.
This is like, I think this is fine to talk about. I remember on like H2K, the people talking the most on H2K were actually like Yankos, and Forgiven would sometimes make like a decisive call. We didn't give much information. Sure. Vander would be the one talking if no one else was talking, right? And sometimes you had to tell Odo to stop, right?
Yeah.
Ryu would say like a sentence maybe every now and again, but in interviews, everyone was seemingly convinced that he was the shot caller. And my mind was like exploding on this. Yeah, and I'm wondering if like a similar thing's happening in Mad, where like reality versus all their perceptions of it, of like, because I feel like Yankos didn't give himself enough credit on that team. At least in the sense of like, when we were winning, he was actually really good at calling on that team. But like, even he gave Ryu all the credit, you know? Yeah. It's like, it's just not what's happening.
It might be because what you'll see is that a lot of early game stuff is dictated by the jungler, because they...
For sure. Elyoya is still doing that,
yeah. So, that might be why they think, okay, he's the one leading us at first, and then later on, the map tends to be a bit more chaotic, so that might be Nisqy being the one mostly talking, but because everybody's like just figuring out what the fuck to do, then that gets a bit more cluttered. But yeah, is there anything in particular you wanted to show about Mad against G2, or maybe even against Misfits that they're trying to do? Is there anything that you'd like to do? Because for me, the game against G2 was pretty clean in the way, because they just didn't give them much wiggle room. They just slowly closed in on them and kept pushing their advantages. I thought it was a great game plan of what they wanted to do, is just shut down Caps so he can't do ridiculous stuff. And as you said, Unforgiven, obviously he had that amazing flank where he completely deleted G2 with the Twitch. Good stuff overall from them. That was very impressive. Obviously, losing against Misfits then was a bit was a bit unfortunate in light of that. But yeah,
like I hesitate to say that I think they would also run it through mid with any other champ. Twitch is just so good for that particular style.
Sure.
And so I like their priority on it. Also, Twitch just it's good into Xerxe, it's good into Ezreal, it's good into so many of the current meta champions. In terms of specific clips, like I can show examples of that happening. But it wouldn't really do much more than just like
sure,
here, for example, like
we don't have to show a video.
Yeah. It's did they play? Wait, let me just see. No, I don't think they did. No. Okay, yeah, never mind. Yeah, no. I think I'm pretty good for my mini Mad Lion speech.
Cool.
Like I enjoy watching their development, especially like
Definitely
seeing that. Yeah, like Elyoya isn't one of the junglers who's losing the argument. You know, Elyoya is definitely able to play efficient jungle right now.
Yeah.
So with that, plus how mid game is being, the only real thing I see is that there's definitely this window before 8 minutes where you can attack mid.
Yeah,
for sure. So I think what you actually want to target, that sounds really weird in light of that. I think what you really want to do is get counter pick for bot lane. Against them, because if you do that and you can open 3-man mid before they can, I think that's the best route. Then I'm not sure what Nisqy Elyoya would do into that. That's the only like aspect of it where I think this is just a gaping hole.
Yeah,
right. That would be how I'd attack Mad Lions if I prepped into them.
Yep.
Get my support in mid first. I pick Pike, shit like this.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm a big fan of Elyoya, and obviously he did have a tougher split last spring. But overall, it's great to see him rise up again in the ranks, so to speak, feeling more enabled by his team, maybe more supported by in what he wants to do. Can rely on his team a bit more as well in what he wants to do. What his team cannot rely on apparently is him locking in the right champion, because I don't know if you saw the voice comms video where there was which game was it again? When did they play
what?
GP? Oh, against Misfits. Right? Only against Misfits, right? They played GP. Yeah.
Yeah, they first picked GP.
No, wait.
Armut locks in GP wrong. They played it. No, they played against G2 as well.
Oh, G2
that was Elyoya.
I don't remember which game it was specifically, but one of these games. Because Mac was saying, you hear him saying in this voice comms video, it's like, okay guys, we're gonna play kill Twitch, and they are gonna we're gonna play we're gonna look in GP Twitch. Yeah, that was the G2 game. And then they're gonna pick kill or something like this, and blah blah blah. And Elyoya just locks in kill, and he's like, oh no wait! And you see everybody's like, what? What happened? And then they remade the draft. I don't know what the rules around this were, but it was such a fun.
They're allowed to do that? I was always told that if they misdo it, you're not allowed.
I don't know. Maybe it's a thing where G2 just had, okay, let them remake the draft or something like this. I don't know what if there was sportsmanship or what the rules specifically.
I mean that's nice if they let them redo it. I would assume the referee would just be like, nah, we're not even going to bother asking G2.
Just I don't know.
Because you can't pause draft.
Because you see his face was like, holy shit, what happened? That was fun. But other than that, yeah, very glad to see him.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
What their plan for Kel would be then. Because if I was doing GP knowing they'd go Kel, I'd flex GP. But you already have Wukong jungle, so the setup you'd end up having would be kind of easy to play into. Yeah, I'd be really interested to see what their plan for that was. Oh, I get maybe it was like fuck you, Armut. That's our plan. Whatever. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I like talking about junglers having a good performance, and against G2 as well. Razork was doing super well against G2 in my opinion. He was everywhere, constantly running around, shutting down G2 when he needed to. Against Australia, he had a bit of a quieter game, I think. But seeing him, he was just like at every point I made was just like, oh yeah, BB overextended, Wunder and Razork jump in for the kill. G2 tries to kill Wunder, but Razork collapses. Razork is everywhere, stealing a Herald from G2. He was everywhere in that game, and that was also good to see. Also, because I said on the last episode that this Fnatic looked very emotionally drained, and it looked very down, and basically and I said, you know, like they need to take a step back, take a breather. This time they were on stage, they were laughing the entire time from when they arrived until they left. They seemed to have such a good time, which is good to see. But I still have the question, okay, is this a team that's going to be so volatile and dependent on their emotions? But yeah, that was just something I wanted to follow up on last week. But yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, big highlight player for me from Fnatic is actually Wunder.
Yeah, Wunder. Yeah.
Wunder's playing these team fights fucking insanely. It's actually insanely nuts to see.
Mm-hmm.
And I also believe, so this is pure conjecture, this has nothing to do with like inside info or something, but just purely from like their post-game interview and also from how things are going in game. I think a huge factor in why things were going so well in the Fnatic G2 game is because they were playing heavy around that top side.
Yeah.
And Wunder and Razork seem to have really good rapport. They seem to understand each other. Mm-hmm. And Wunder is playing all these skirmishes and team fights basically perfectly.
Yeah.
On that Gragas is actually fucking insane. Like this is something I'd consider banning, which G2, you know, did ban.
Yeah.
But I think a large factor is because so much of the Fnatic G2 game was decided topside, and Razork Wunder are actually two of the best players that they have, and Humanoid is probably still the best mid in Europe. It's difficult because, like, basically in the last 3 weeks of spring, Cap started becoming the best again. Yeah. So
and
it's really difficult.
It's been very solid as well in these past weeks. So
yes. I mean, if you're getting. Can I say this word? I mean, yeah. What the fuck? We're not on the thing. Yeah, if he's getting gangbanged mid by Mad Lion's not going to put that entirely on him. Like, but when it comes to but like Humanoid's still competing up there, right? Mm-hmm. He's still there in the Caps Larson area. Like their top side is disturbingly strong.
Yeah,
and if Wunder and Razork have this kind of rapport, it wasn't much of a surprise to me that, you know, when the game became so heavily dictated by topside skirmishes, they were winning, especially with the way that Wunder's playing in these fights. And I'm so glad that Wunder's doing this well, not just because I banked heavily on him in the tier list, so that is a big part of it, but also because like my impression of him has always been that this is actually a guy who's just willing to play anything and do anything for the team.
Yeah.
Which is
exactly. Yeah. I did an interview with him in the spring split, where it was like, okay, you know, and how do you see your role in the team? Because you are a super flexible player, you know. Yes. We've seen you play basically everything. And he said, and back then he said, you know, like at this point we're still trying to figure out what we want to do with the team, blah blah blah. But he also said, if I have to play 14 games of Gragas top, I will play 14 games of Gragas top for the team. You know, like... And that is exactly the right mentality that you want, because this guy understands that it's a team game, and he just needs to play his part very well in order for that to function. And he can play other parts, but he is also realistic enough to realize, okay, maybe these components that I'm working with right now require other things and are maybe more one-dimensional or whatever than, you know, the G2 highlight days where everybody could play everything and they would make it work or whatever. So I think it's a very good sense of maturity for him to see, okay, you know what, I'll just play my role and I'll play it consistently and I'll do my job, which is something we also saw, I think, in the first week, which is like, okay, he's just, you know, his job is just don't die in your lane. Make sure that in team fights you do good stuff, and that's what he's doing.
Yes,
and very, very consistently so. But I was more specifically mentioning Razork as a transition from Elyoya from Mad Lions to Fnatic, because in that game against G2, he was everywhere and he was doing super well as well.
And he's on Viego. Like a couple of things that should give Fnatic fans, like other than the Wunder thing that we were talking about. Mm-hmm. The things that Fnatic fans were really excited about in the victory on G2 is that they played a wider map state, right? This wasn't just all considerations around one lane. Yep. You also had Hylissang leaning heavy topside as well. And you had Upset on the Twitch transition into these heavy roaming plays rather than just peeling off and going and farming somewhere or some shit like this, right? So they were playing as a team on the complete map, and Razork was allowed to play something other than shit that gets useless at 20 minutes, right? And he was able to prove that with that, he's able to play really well. Which, I mean, for me, I've always known. But obviously that's being like, there's being a lot of questionable narratives around that. So the fact that they're able to play more than just one particular style, and the fact that they are proved it was so successful in the first game, that's really, really good. Because I'd imagine if this game went bad for them, they just wouldn't even try this again. It's like, just fuck off on top, everyone move bot again, blah, 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 blah. So there's a lot of things to be excited about there. When it comes to Razork, it's never he's had like a really, really good game. It's like he's had a really, really good game again. You know, like there are so many splits where he's just had absolute monster games that I feel like it shouldn't be a surprise that if he's even vaguely played around, the game is just Astro 1. But so for me, it's more like thank fuck finally rather than anything. And also, like I like the idea of playing into the GP as well. Like there were so many games in the last weekend. I'm definitely thinking about Rogue XL now as well, where teams were playing away from GP. The teams who were playing against GP would play away from the GP, and they were losing a lot because of that. Whereas Fnatic either identified or due to circumstance of playing into it, right? So I really liked that aspect of this as well.
It was
that's
Rogue XL
good.
where Odoamne was dealing monsters amount of damage. It was he was doing a lot there.
Yes, I mean that game's really interesting actually. The Rogue XL game, especially in light of what we're talking about.
Yeah, just to round up, I guess the Fnatic thing, and especially Wunder. It was also with him against Astralis. I mean, Fnatic was winning definitely, but there was this dragon fight. I don't remember which drake it was, but Astralis looked like it was winning, and then Wunder turned around and like dash flashed and stunned two of them, and that was just
I remember that.
That was fight over. That was crazy as well.
Yeah, because I was thinking there was something about the Fnatic Australis game, and I'm trying to remember, and I was flicking through. But I remember what you're talking about, and I have it stayed in my head when Wunder does the double knockup. But no, that was like, but he was doing that last week as well, no? Was he against the Twitch? Was it against Mad? Actually, last week?
Oh, Fnatic?
Fnatic. Yeah, it was against Mad Lions.
Yeah, so
no, it wasn't this guy who was doing it. This was
he played Fiora there.
Yeah, okay, it was Gragerson to BDS against the Cogmore. Yeah. He was in those team fights. He was like isolating their carries, like he was isolating Xmati, he was isolating Nuclear in as much as possible, and the angles he was finding on his barrels were absolutely insane to both isolate them and defend his team at the same time. Like he was just he just downloaded the optimal game plan for each fight.
It's like in the Matrix, it's like, okay, I learned Kung Fu, I learned how to play Gragas perfectly. Exactly.
Yes, but there are just only so many ways I can say Wunder good,
I mean, it boils down like he is. Yeah, I don't know if people are actually hype about him because it's not that he has like the most flashy role within the team, but he does insane shit, and it's really, really good to see him.
People should be. People should be hyped about him. Yeah. People should be excited to see Razork being relevant in a game.
Yep.
Like, this should excite Fnatic fans. But I know, like, when it comes to Fnatic fans, they lean very, very heavily to the symbolic carry, no matter who it is. In the past, it's been Reckless, it's been XPeke.
Yeah. I mean, now it's going to be...
It was Yellow Star, I remember, at one point. Like, so nowadays, it's going to be Upset anyway. But I think, like, I'd hope that they would be a bit more flexible here and understand like the top side. There's so much to be excited about, because I assume if I say that they'll think, oh, what, humanoid? But Wunder is like so fucking good for them for the last few weeks. That like if I was a Fnatic fan, that would be preeminent in my head. Wunder is basically saving us in all these fights. Oh my god.
Yeah, fully agree. I also struggle to find more ways to say Wunder is very good, but he's just everything the team needs him to be and more. So doing super well. You mentioned being excited about XL Rogue, which is
Yeah,
a
because of the
game.
gangplank
Oh
difference.
my god, that was a game and a half because I remember I think I was in an interview there. Yeah, I was in an interview and then I came back and I was like, okay, did I miss anything? And it was like, dude, this is a bit of a fiesta. So I rewatched obviously the VODs, and it was first that I saw like a comp was overextending in bot and I had to flash and Excel punished that. But then Rogue keeps going top, and it was Rogue trying to leverage their advantage and they threw it a bit. Then Excel was in control, but Excel randomly decided to die one by one. And then Rogue was back in control. It was a crazy game to watch, but a very exciting one between, I guess, two teams that people would imagine are in contention for a world spot this split.
Well, so the really interesting thing to me about the game. So okay, can you show my screen?
I am showing your screen.
So remember what we were talking about last. Oh my god, I clicked on it precisely. Remember what we were talking about last time when it comes to Excel and those timers that they're playing with on bot side?
Yeah.
If I want to contest those timers, this is the exact thing I'd lock in. Gangplank Callista. You don't just have heavy priority on bot side, but you also have the 0.5 on top lane, by which I mean whenever we used to see a gangplank on my teams, we would like add a 0.5 when he has his ult up. So you wouldn't be 2v2 on bot with gangplank, it would be like 2.5, with gangplank ult up. So this allows you to play heavy for bot side, and you have probably the best early game bot lane champion, right? Like, I'm never impressed if I see Callista winning lane. Just doesn't do it.
Who's a lot of damage.
I think it was Unforgiven versus Neon or something like this, or versus Xerxe or something. I don't remember. Like someone was playing Callista last week, and people were like, "Oh my god, this guy played so good. It's such a shame that they lost." It's like, dude, he won lane with Callista. What are you gonna? But if I want to disrupt those bot side plays, this is how I would do it. And I actually thought it went like a little bit disaster at first, because at about 5 minutes they still get the play up. Look, but I'm just there, by the way. I've downloaded it.
Okay.
So Trimby just like throws hook for fun, I guess, because that's how we do things.
Yeah, but they turned this fight.
Yeah. Marcoon's here. They don't turn this fight.
Oh wait, which one?
Comp dies. Wait. I remember the whole narrative of the game. Okay. So Comp dies, and I'm thinking, shit, XL have actually got it again, right? Like, you had to be a bit safer on this point if you want to do it later on. Mm-hmm. But despite the fact that they've got the kill and the flash out on Comp, right? At this point, they do make sure, because I'm eyeing the whole time, like, I don't want from 5:30 onwards for Oda1 to use his ultimate for lane or for a skirmish or for a mid lane kill or something like this, because you have to disrupt their push now, because they've got the kill, they've got the reset, and now they're pushing out again to move towards mid. Trimby secures Larson on mid. Love the comet from Larson. That's how you get mid priority here, which lets you lean down and contest bot side, right? Larson leans down with Trimby as an escort, and there's a little bit of additional pressure. Patrick, Mickey X want to shove this out. Marcoon moves to push them through again. We know that if they do this, they're going to move towards mid. Mm-hmm. But this time, you have Malwong skipping all his camps on bot side, running straight bot even before you see Marcoon, because they know that they want to disrupt this. Look, see Malwong's pathing here, right? They definitely want to be disrupting this on bot side. That's the intention. Odo leaves top lane. You might be able to see it on the mini-map, to go into Fog to see if he presses ult, and he presses ult on them. They have the 0.5, they have Marlon coming down. They're able to contest anyway. Yeah. They're able to contest anyway. But this composition, with that mid priority from the Comet Azir, with the GP top, and with such a heavy skirmishing bot lane, and definitely with the positioning that all of the players in the game had, they were very conscious of this timing from XL, and they disrupted it. And after they disrupt it, they're able to be first on, and honestly, XL didn't look like they knew another way to come back into the game. This is probably a really good game for them to learn from, because these timings haven't been contested from them in the first weeks. And it looked almost at one point as if Patrick's team fighting was just going to be enough for them to win. He played phenomenally this game, right? But Rogue were eventually able to just close it. Obviously, Larson had that int around like this part of the map, but But outside of that, and Patrick was saying team fighting, it doesn't seem like Excel have an idea of how to force back into the game after those initial timings are disrupted.
Yeah.
Whereas we know if they get that timing, they look so clean, right? But that doesn't make them binary.
Well, it did feel like they at least got to relative even footing a bit, but that was mostly punishing Rogue's mistakes. So it's not exactly that they have a game plan in order to recover. It's more like, okay,
they have good players, and good team fight.
Yeah, that's
especially
what they
Patrick.
have. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And that felt more like what I was seeing there. It's like, okay, I tweeted, like it's a LEC high game quality and an image of Game of Throws. Because both teams were having a little bit of an a few in moments, but that was exactly what Rogue did first. Like, okay, it felt, I'm not sure if they got a bit cocky or felt a bit too comfortable or just didn't realize what the enemy where they were and what the potential was of still losing the game. But then when Excel randomly died one by one later in the game, it was Rogue who was pretty coordinated in how they wanted to punish Excel.
Yes.
And that was very good for them as well to see. Which kind of looped me back to what I started with. Are all team, like, the league is very close, are all teams good? Is everybody shit? There are clear flaws in both of these teams still. But
definitely Excel with they're out of their comfort zone and they have to be grouping up a lot more. They're out of position in those groupings, right? This isn't a scenario that they've had to practice very much on stage.
Yeah.
In scrims, sure, like it's all chaos, maybe they're grouped up a lot there, but this is a kind of thing that is completely different when you experience it in a slower game on stage when people are actually setting up on you. And it's clear to me that they're very good at wide map states, and they're very good at playing those wide map states to shift into a smaller, concentrated one where they're ahead.
Mm-hmm.
But if we think about those, we're talking now like 5v3, right? 5v2 setups that they look for on their fights.
Yep.
Very rarely 5-on-5 outside of those Drake, Herald, Barons. Yep. And Rogue have definitely exposed that, right? Rogue have also exposed that they can fuck up team fights too.
Yeah.
But
very clearly, yeah.
But what was perceived to be a better early game from Excel is perhaps a one-trick better early game system in this very specific regard.
Yeah.
Mephisto actually talked about that in an interview recently, where he contrasted Vitality's, in his opinion, multifaceted way of playing the game, where anyone can be the carry, blah blah blah, versus Excel's binary bot stealthing, right? Like you know how they're going to try to break open the game. That makes them more vulnerable than Vitality. Not quite sure how that works, because you can apparently just blow on Vitality the wrong way and they'll lose. but this is ultimately his point, right? And I agree on that one. I also think they'll VOD review this. They'll find other ways to bring back into the game. Maybe they won't go something like Hell, because this leaves you with much less options than you otherwise would have to force in.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like it's a learning experience from them, and this was very interesting because the narrative we had from them before.
But I mean, like given like focusing on Excel, given how much they have grown already heading into the split, I'm pretty optimistic that this is a team that can figure out how to solve these problems going forward in the rest of the season, because we still have like 5 more weeks to play, especially with the break in between. It gives a little bit of time to assess and to try to figure out new stuff.
Yes, theory time.
Yes, exactly. So I'm pretty optimistic still about that, but it was also kind of refreshing to see, okay, Rogue is a team that is still able to topple like a team like this, and Rogue is kind of coming back into finding ways to how do you say it, adapt to their opponents and what they want to do.
Yes.
I mean, like Rogue also played against SK, and actually it was also not a very good game from Rogue, but
finally people are playing Xerxe though.
Yeah,
like they should have been doing it.
That's
last
my
split.
note as well. Like Odo's engages on Xerxe. Oh, they were beautiful. They were really, really good. He found great engages on them.
Yeah, and they needed them because first off, so I want to clarify a point I made earlier where like Elyoya contrasted with Malwang was like such a breath of fresh air. Like his early game control was so good. I think the XL game from Malwang was the best game I've seen him do. It was still inefficient in parts, but that was one of the best games I've seen him do. The Rogue SK early game continued the same kind of things that I was liking from it, where he was actually. I mean, I remember going back on the Jarvan game and thinking at this point where he's escorting Odo, oh, he's actually just trying to force the gank or whatever. But he's still at least considering playing all lanes on both games. But the big difference in the Rogue SK game is that you had Trimby on something very punishable for extensions, which is Nami, and you still had these guys making heavy extensions into enemy territory without priorities and just getting punished for that. And that's ultimately what happened in the SK game. Especially Lee Sin Silas, they're going to be able to insta-burst those guys, and they were able to do quite well in that game. I feel so bad for... Okay, I also have to say, I feel bad for Certus, because what was the other game they played against Vitality? He was doing really well in that game as well, and they just could not win.
Yeah. Yes, where he played Lissandra.
Yes, I don't know. Like, this guy's just cursed right now, but these things do they do happen. The biggest enemies for Rogue in the SK game were their jungle support in mid game. That was very disappointing to see. I remember instances.
We saw SK like get a Baron at 20 minutes where Rogue should have probably gotten it, right? In that game where Rogue. Yeah, but Rogue tried to engage on them and try to find the picks, but SK just said, well, that's not going to work against us, because, I mean, they had an Ornn just tanking all the damage, I think it was there. And SK turned that fight around and get a Baron, actually. And that was a point where, like, okay, I just saw Rogue punish XL very well previously, but now I'm seeing Rogue that is not really able to win against a team like SK, which, as we said before, is not a team that has amounted to much so far in terms of how they want to play the game. So that made me a bit worried. But because we saw... I mean, it's not just Odo, obviously, but he just was the standout player with these great engages, and he found those setups for his team to take over the game.
I mean, it's Senna double tank composition.
Yeah.
So if you're not able to get like an isolated burst out at the start of the fight as Lucian Nami, like, it's very, very doomed. Lucian is just useless, really, into so many compositions later on. Like, he basically just presses R and then that's it. Like, have fun. Because now almost anything else he does, he's under threat, especially against a composition like this. So all your damage is on Corki, and Corki takes a while to get to the point where he's actually able to do a lot. And inevitably, Corki is still poke damage, right? Poke versus a sustain-based composition is a big no-no, right? So these are their team fighting issues. And then what you want to do in that case is you want to isolate your opponents so they don't face you in 5-on-5 situations. But Trundle Nami extending in jungle, or just extending in general, is making it difficult for them to set up the map in their favor. So these issues were compounding. The reason that they won is just because they have better players overall. But their draft plan here leaves very little open, and will not do so well later on. And I mean, you do have these two individual issues that compound a lot in a game like this. Like, SK by right should have won this game. I can't remember what happened on like the 4th Drake, where they lost it. Was this like a steal or something? I can't remember what happened. Like, they lost one Infernal, so they weren't able to get Soul. But if they get that Soul, I think they just end up winning, you know? And that, for me, was like the big risk. It was a difficult game to watch. I'm glad Odo had like an obviously good game from him. But yeah, there were just too many variables here that I hated seeing on my screen, to be honest.
Yeah. It's still hard for me to gauge Rogue, but at least we're seeing that they are finding their place more, and I guess that's good. And also, where previously Rogue would be a team that goes for very standard stuff, seeing something like a Zac top from them is a good sign for me, where they're like, you know, we see this angle in the meta that nobody else is approaching. We're gonna try it, and even if it's against a team like SK, good. You know, you throw it in there.
Well, I'll tell you what irritates me about them is that Rogue can actually flex Nasus. And Nasus is really good.
Oh my god.
Into Kalista, into Azir,
We've arrived.
into Kale.
Okay.
It destroys Kale, right? They
Yeah.
can flex it, all right? Boys, if you want to, I'm just saying, if you want to do it, like, I'm just saying, like, you guys can do it better than most do. Trimby has hovered at Nasus long enough, right?
Yeah, he has done it a few times now, exactly.
Yeah.
Vitality then.
Yeah.
Yeah. You wanted to talk about what the hell was going on with Vitality, you said. They were, I think, the first team to play Bel'Veth, or was that Astralis, actually?
No, it was them. They were the first team.
Yeah, they were the first one to look it in for Haru. And what I distinctly remember from Haru playing Bel'Veth is that he didn't do much with it except for farming. It was like, whenever he got like his true form, it was like, okay, let's go, let's see those like Void Remorates or whatever they're called, or Remoras, whatever. Remoraid is a Pokemon, I think. Remoras in action. And then I think we saw them once when he got an objective, because even when they got an objective, he went just straight back to farming. So that was interesting. But in the end, he went 505 with it, I think. Still did a lot of damage with the champion, because it's a pretty broken one at this point.
Yeah, I mean, with Bel'Veth, you do want to play pretty heavily for Heralds, and their setups for Heralds are pretty... Like, well, first off, I actually think Lavrov understood really well how you want to be setting up for Herald. Not in, like, the Excel way, but in the way that he was actually aiming for the... And I'll actually put this up on screen. He was actually aiming for the 5-minute flash timing on mid lane, even if on the execution they weren't able to do something on it. But if you were to get this flash timing... or you're able to get a flash timing at around 6 minutes or so, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, you deny them flash on an engaged champion on the first Herald play, right? So a lot of teams at Worlds will inevitably be good on these timings if they're playing a Herald-based comp, but I don't really see it that much in Europe. Lavrov didn't get one there, but then on the bounce back here, and they're using Ezreal here to allow Lavrov to extend on top side, right, for as long as he can. Ezreal's one of the safest ones to do that with. Yeah. He goes again for the flash play, and he actually gets it this time round. He interrupts. Xerxe has to burn flash. That's flash on a big engager, right? And he disrupts Xerxe's attempts to make sure that Perks doesn't get priority back. I think this was all really, really good by Lavrov. And then he sets up bot lane again so that they can be unleashed for Herald fight, but they are massively late. Like here, right? He starts pushing out for Ezreal, right? And then he wards here, and then they stay. And now he starts moving, but they know for ages that they want to make this Herald play happen. Yeah. And there is no game plan for them to just unlock bot lane without Alistar oinking there. So all this playing for flash timing doesn't make sense with regards to that. They get here anyway, and because Xerxe isn't able to just flash engage on the opponents, they don't get Herald off of this, thank fuck, but obviously you'd have preferred to get Herald on this rotation. And then we go into replay, and it's like, great, they can set up for Herald again off of this. They were at least able to deny it from them, and the flash timings are still in play. But then we come back, and it's like, wait, where's this setup? Lavrov still hasn't recalled yet, right? Ari's only just recalling. Bel'Veth, I can't really tell what she's done because whatever she did was on replay. And I still didn't see any itemization yet or anything. And Alistar's again stuck bot, and enemy is first on Herald again. So even though clearly Lavrov knows that you should be playing for flash timers for this first Herald contest, they have no seeming plan to unlock. And what's the obvious way that you would do that? I mean, you do it the way that Misfits have done it, the way that XL have done it, the way that Rogue have done it. You do this with jungle, but where the fuck is Haru? Right? And so now they're doing it way too late, and they lose Herald. And this is like a huge thing for Bel'Veth. Bel'Veth with that, becomes the absolutely disturbing monster that everyone says. Like, yes, Haru's making all these funny flash plays later, right? That people are memeing on. But for me, it's like this level of they either don't they do understand the priority, but they don't have any clue on how to do it, or they just don't include Haru in any of these plans. And then in the next game that they play, right? I see similar weird shit from Haru. I think I may have actually leaned to the exact point. So yeah, I've actually managed to somehow click to the right point.
Yeah, you're on fire today. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Haru's bot side camps are spawning here, right? And this is something I talk about all the time, right? So you have bot lane on bad wave.
Mm-hmm.
You have Ari about to get priority, and you'd think Hecarim's going to do Ari into bot side to escort this out. You get resets for both of your major carries, right? But instead, this guy's like, oh, it's perfect time to do Raptors. What could go wrong?
Yep.
You know? As if there isn't Drake up, as if you don't like, why aren't these two shifting in towards bot side to escort this? Then your whole map gets reset, and you're ahead on tempo. Right? If they want to go for one mountain Drake, fuck it, let them. They'll be so far behind the tempo on that you acquire plates for it, and you can play heavy on other side, right? Like, who cares? On next rotation, when you see that the Drake's getting taken, then you can take his full top side. Why is this Raptors so worth when this just becomes a really obvious play for Astralis, right? Yep. It doesn't turn into a dramatic kill, but it's like Haru just isn't involved in any of the map plans. Yep. I don't know, and now they're talking about Bo in interviews. And do you count it Bo, Boo? I don't know. I don't watch LPL. Bo, yeah, it's Bo. Like they're talking about Bo and how like you want to let him do his thing, but you also want him to be able to play with you, but you don't want to like do it too much. Like you want to, want to develop him properly and blah blah blah. And it's like, I don't mean to harp on this part, but like. I mean, Selfmade would have recognized its escort, and we were calling Selfmade a selfish jungler. You know, that's what's being said of him. Yeah. But Jungle just isn't involved in any of these plays right now. I don't understand what change you actually think you've made, except maybe you've made it harder to communicate with Haru. This
is very interesting because today I published an interview with Alfari that I did last week after their win against SK. And I'll read you what he said, because he said, after the O2 week, which was in week 2, what did they do? And he said, like, okay, we had more issues fixed. And I asked him, can you expand on those issues? He said, the early game is the biggest issue. This is a lot of sides to it. Even if we had winning lanes, we weren't playing for dice, we weren't playing for scuttles, we weren't playing for invades, where we're using our heralds very badly. We got herald in 4 or 5 games, and when you get herald, you're supposed to win. It's supposed to be pretty damn straightforward. Take a tower and then play on 2 lanes. And force the enemy to match you because you're ahead all the time, basically. So yeah,
my man's has been VOD reviewing Excel.
Yeah.
Go on.
so yeah, we had really bad herald usage. We had no real planning in the early game, I would say. Our level 1 was an issue we identified, where we had miscommunication and our early jungle pathing wasn't clear. We didn't know what we wanted from each other as a team. And then I asked him, I would expect that with so many veterans, something like herald usage would come naturally. What's going wrong? And he says, well, I mean, we have a new player, Haru, who doesn't speak English, and he is the one who has Herald. That's one thing. And yes, we have experience as players, and then he talks a bit about how Karsi and Labrov should be more demanding in resources, and they're a bit more accommodating. But yeah, then he later on says, let's see. Yeah, he says, I think we're a different team from Spring. I would say that one of our strengths in Spring was our early game. I think this is one of Selfmade's biggest strengths as a player. He's very creative and has a good champion pool. Let's see. He has a lot of real strengths, but then we had a problem in our mid to late game. And that's what they tried to fix with Haru, because Haru ties the team a bit better together in a mid to late game. And that's something also they still want to improve on, but it's at a better spot. So yeah, then he said, our mid-late game is a bit calmer compared to Spring. The quality of practice we have in scrims, it's also less chaotic. There are fewer random fights going on in general. This isn't all on Selfmade, of course. He was one chaotic factor, but it's not like he was the cause of us taking random fights. And Haru brings more composure to the team in general. So, tying that to your point, by the way, I don't know if I said this, but you can find this full interview on infanglobal.com.
Click the link in the description below.
Not gonna be a link there, but just infanglobal.com or on my Twitter, whatever. So yeah, like tying that to what you said, is that this early game, and you also mentioned Selfmade, he would have recognized what to do here. Alfari, at least, and I assume the rest of the team as well, is aware of this. It's just as an overall cocktail of the team, they wanted to shift towards being a bit more composed. And now, as he said as well, now we need to fix the early game. As well as the implication as well that, like, for example, a bad wave state like this, the bot lane wouldn't call this, to the team. So maybe this is something like perks how we might have reacted to if they had called it, right? Maybe, yeah.
But but they're not talking enough. And also, Haru doesn't speak English, so when it comes to you should be doing this and blah 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 blah, it's harder to impart that to him, right? Like that's sort of like there are actually, oddly enough, the last example I can remember was also on Vitality. Like there were a lot of junglers back in the day that people were bringing in when Koreans were like super hyped and stuff, where it's like inevitably it's difficult to even include them in the review part because you have to spend an inordinate amount of time just translating things to them. Even once you get people like translators in, people think once you get a translator and it's all good. And then the translators realize, well, I understand Korean perfectly. I do not understand this weird EUWEs that these players are speaking. And what the fuck? What is Space Glide? Like they have no clue what's being talked about here. So this is one aspect where I think the LS iteration of Cloud9 was somewhat getting correct, is that they brought in translators that also had game knowledge, right? Because they would understand kind of. Actually, you might still end up the same problems where they don't understand some of the EUS vernacular, but they may understand the point being made overall, and they can at least impart that. It's difficult. You make development very difficult, even in like static parts of the game. And early game is a static part of the game, just by bringing on someone like Haru. And when I look at this, it's clearly not working. Like Alfari took the words out of my mouth when it comes to all this early game stuff. I can't speak for the composure later on.
That's something I have to trust him on, right? Because he's in that moment and in the team.
Yeah, exactly. But if he struggles to speak English, then what I actually hear from that is maybe Haru just doesn't try to do as much, which I know not to be true, because I can remember. You remember we were going through, I think, week 1, the engages that they were doing away from perks. Haru was the guy engaging a lot of the time there. So I'm not so sure if I would agree with him on that.
I mean, it might be just that it's mostly boils down to that communication part, right? That they're just not sure what to expect from each other as teammates as a whole, and that's why they're struggling so heavily in the early game. But also what you said about Bo, it's interesting because Vitality, I'm not sure if they're foreshadowing subbing in Bo actually, because the thing is,
that's what it looked like to me.
It kind of did, right? Because I remember when they signed Haru and Bo, it's like, okay, we're gonna do a Haru now. We're gonna bring Bo in for the long term, until he's like mastered English enough to the point where he can play. And then I thought, okay, like heading into the split, I thought, okay, if this team is gonna be struggling, Bo is just gonna come in and they're just gonna give it a try to see if it's any better, because if it's not, if it's bad, how much worse can it get, right? But now in their statement, they actually said, Bo is now in Europe and he's been making great progress on his English and stuff like this and blah blah blah. I was like, okay, this is one of the boxes that you wanted to tick for him subbing into the team, and now maybe they have this break as well. That, like, who knows? They might be practicing with him, but then I think. I'm just not sure if they're actually gonna do that, because if I read it like this, like what Alfari is saying, is like, we're still gonna try to fix our early game, and in terms of standings, they're not looking too bad yet, right? So they're in 4-3 at this point. I don't know what they want to do with this.
Roster changes are a really good way of giving your team a mental reset.
It is, yeah. But they don't strike me as a team that needs one at this point.
Well, nor did the team last. Well, okay, no, I tell a lie there. I thought the team lost split needing the mental reset, right? But I didn't want to replace any of the players.
Yeah.
I think you must have a mental reset, right? And don't want to just keep changing jungler over and over again. Just change the coaching stuff. Like I didn't see any fucking coaching influence here when I look at this shit. Like this like everyone's out of sync. No one knows what the game plan is except for Lavrov, apparently. Like no one has a clue what they're doing here. This isn't like and that it create an environmental change, sure, but at some point you have to stick with your 5-man, because you're never developing a team if there's never a fucking static team in the first place.
Yeah, that's one thing as well. I mean, obviously other teams make changes as well, like in roster, but it's more like I think mostly of Fnatic last year, where they banned also self-made poor guy, and then and then made Weibo jungler and brought in Adam. That wasn't necessarily. I think that was definitely because it was just about team atmosphere, right? It was literally where they didn't get along and they needed to change, and it was Selfmade who bit the dust there. Team atmosphere was never a problem here at Vitality. They're always very quick to say how proactive they are in talking with each other, and that there's never bad vibes and stuff like this. That they always are able to find each other and talk with each other. But yeah, at some point, like as you say, it's hard for a team to come together in a way if they like how they want to play if you keep changing the team, right? And then it's just about okay, who's giving the direction. And I'm not sure what goes on behind the scenes with the coaching staff. They have a very extensive coaching staff at this point, right? They brought in a lot of extra analysts and coaches and stuff like this. But what I remember from doing an interview before everything started was Mephisto's goal was, Perks wants to go to Worlds and he wants to be successful. And Mephisto said, "It's my goal. My goal is to help Perks do this," which back then, in terms of hierarchy, didn't strike me as the right order. Where it's like you are trying to help a player, where it's more like no, you should be directing a player. Maybe that's what he meant, and that's how he's gonna do it. But in the way this team seemed to be structured at the start, at least to me, sounded a bit like okay. This is gonna put Perks in charge, and everybody else is gonna be dancing around them, which might not be the case now, but that's how it struck me then. And if I see what this team is doing now in terms of, I don't know, like it doesn't seem like they've made much progress from spring to summer. It's just that they flipped the issues they had in terms of okay, first they had a early game that was strong and then fumbled the late game, and now they have more composure in the late game, but the early game is struggling. So I'm not sure if they think early game might be easier to fix as a team as a whole, and that's something that we might need to see going forward in the split. But I will say that for coaching stuff, it's pretty difficult after 3 weeks to see like steady progress. I'm not sure yet. I would say like I would be more like okay, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. If you haven't seen progress, then okay, then it's clearly something going wrong. But who knows?
Yeah, but if they're thinking about doing that to the player, then my biggest issue, right, is because you brought up Fnatic last split, right?
Yeah.
I like to bring up a different team when it comes to constant swaps, right? Vitality in 2021 spring had Sigenda, Skeens, Belitza, Comp, Lavrov.
Yep.
In 2021 summer, they had SLT, Self-Made Leader, Crownshot, Lavrov, right? They actually switched Comp for Crownshot in the middle of spring.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the middle of summer, they then switched SLT for Sigenda after basically overhauling the whole lineup again, right? So there's 2 overhauls, right? And they end up switching halfway through the split both times. Mm-hmm. And then the next split, they overhaul the lineup again, right? And it's Alfari, Self-Made, Perks, Kazi, Lavrov, right? Lavrov's like the only guy that they don't overhaul every time. Mm-hmm. And then this split, they've all again with Alfari, Haru, Perks, Kazi, Lavrov. They get an award in spring 2022 for finally not making a mid-split substitution. And now this split, they're looking to make a mid-split substitution again.
Potentially,
right? Like,
we don't know, right?
But it's like if like at some point, it's not the players, right? The people who are choosing and deciding how to run this team are. Like when it comes to Vitality, are definitely the ones at fault, because Vitality has gone through so many goddamn band-aid changes that at some point, right, the whole body has to be called into question. And you've replaced as many organs as you possibly can here, right? Everything surrounding it has to be the goddamn problem at this point. And that's why I think if you want to get a mental reset, maybe let's not go into insanity and keep playing with players' careers and look at the people surrounding them, because this seems to be the only consistent factor, given that nothing but Lavrov is consistent anywhere else, and it's definitely not Lavrov's fault.
Yeah, I'm not sure who makes the final calls on Vitality and their shot, because obviously last year, who did they have as the main coach? It wasn't Mephisto. Mephisto got promoted to head coach this year. It was somebody else. I actually forgot.
It was Realistic, I believe, was in summer.
No, they had a different head coach. I'll look it up. I forgot. I think I even did an interview with the guy.
Taz was head coach.
That's the one.
Taz was head coach, yes. Yeah. Which basically means Realistic was head coach, but sure, Taz was head coach.
Yeah, so I don't know what the inner dynamics are, right? Between these people. and who's making those changes. It might be that upper management is telling them, "Hey guys, we're not going well. You have to make changes." And then management said, "Okay, I mean, we were being forced to make changes, and we have to do something." That could be a situation.
Duke was the head coach for spring because
Before,
in spring it was Duke, and then in
Yeah.
summer it was Taz,
yeah,
and really,
yeah.
so
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm not sure like how this is done organizationally. But I do agree that at some point you have to, especially when you have this lineup, it's like, okay,
this level of money involved, yes, like this is
You make
expensive.
this investment, and obviously, finishing fifth is a big disappointment in spring. But you at some point have to give the team the time to come together as well.
Yeah, this is the thing I didn't understand about swapping out self-made. You got 3-0'd, sure. G2 3-0'd everybody on the way to winning.
Yeah.
Okay? You lost to the winners, all right? And you actually looked pretty competitive into them, and self-made was dominating early into them, right? Like, this was not a loss I would be changing lineup for. Like, this didn't look to me like, oh, well, this guy's inting, so we have to get rid of him for next split or something. Like, you lost to the overall winners. You looked good while doing it, all right? And G2 shat on everyone else as well, eventually, right? Once they figured out one existed. So this was not something to panic about, to make changes about. I don't like change in the first place, but I mean, we can't talk about every week how much I prefer they kept self-made. Like, at least it's always something else. But yeah.
I mean, for me, the biggest part with self-made is I just hope that this guy at some point finds a roster that he is allowed kind of to thrive on or function in, because he is so wickedly talented. And maybe, maybe it's never gonna happen, but yeah. All right, do we want to talk about like more in-game stuff about Vitality? Because I think
we talked a lot about in-game stuff with Vitality as well.
It's just their early game, right? All right. I mean, teams we haven't actually actively very much talked about are Astralis, SK, I think G2 actually. Well, we talked a bit about them when we spoke about Mad Lions and Fnatic and their games together. Yeah. BDS, your good friend, went 0-2, losing to Misfits and Excel.
My good friend.
Yeah, like every episode so far, you've had passionate discussions about BDS and how they're one step away from greatness. But yeah, is there anything about any of those teams you still want to discuss, or any of the teams we already discussed maybe that you want to talk about? If not, you can just call it a caller episode as well. That's a shorter episode. That's also fine. That's also a possibility.
I mean, just a small note on Astralis, I guess.
Sure.
Is that they do, like, whereas I still believe that their solo laners map movements are really good, like, it's so two things actually. So first of all, on the solo laners thing, I think Vizichachi is clearly having some mechanical issues here, right? He in the one-on-one, right? He's I mean, I don't want to just say he's not as good as the top laners he's against, but he's a very, very intelligent player who needs some help to get started, I feel like, right now. And I feel like that's probably the easiest way to play into them now. Xerxe is so different from how he was years ago in Europe. I don't know what happened to him in North America, but the timings in which he's giving up camps are really, really good right now. And I'm very, very impressed overall by watching him play. He's there when he needs to be, on escorts, on ganks, in situations where the Xerxe from 3 years ago would not be. Yeah. It's one of the biggest improvements I've seen of any jungler. And I think he's not getting the attention he deserves for his performance. And I hope it continues. Like, I'm going to keep watching him closely because, yeah, like maybe next time I'll see if I can prep something on Xerxe as well for the show, because no one's talking about this guy, but he's playing really fucking well in the jungle right now.
Yeah.
And I'm very impressed by it. But other than that, like with SK Gaming, again, it's a case of like, if you don't have something nice to say, except free Certus, don't say anything. I mean, props to Gadget for coming in, and
the tweet.
to SK.
Oh no, the poor guy.
Well, I wasn't going to mention that part.
No,
I was going to
I will,
say,
but it's fine. Go ahead.
well, you can, but props to SK for letting Gadget play his AP pool on bot lane, because this guy basically plays Majors bot lane, that's his thing, and I could live a long and happy life without watching him play actual AD carries. But I'm glad SK didn't just like force him into their style and were like, okay, how do we play around like you doing Karthus or something like that? And that actually led to some good early playaways that went well for them. So I'm glad with the way that they used him. Get well soon, Jezu. I hope you're back in soon.
Yeah. I was just gonna mention it because it's too funny to me. Like,
yes, it's pretty funny.
On June 22, before he got subbed into SK, because he plays in their Prime League team. He touched on the topic of Lee Sin, and he said, "I think Lee Sin is actually a good champ right now. In early game, it has a lot of damage and good skirmishing. In mid game, his kick provides playmaking potential. In late game, you can kick your coach for picking this champ." And then he gets subbed into the LEC, and then is forced to play alongside Lee Sin twice. So they picked Lee Sin twice, and they go 0-2. Now they did play against Vitality and Rogue, which are teams that are supposed to be a bit stronger. But it's overall it says, oh, this poor man, he mocks picking Lee Sin, then gets subbed in and has to play alongside Lee Sin. It's a world of hurt for this guy, but it's so perfect for the memes. It's a banger tweet just in general. But
I mean, like you say, like Rogue Vitality is supposed to be stronger teams. Like Vitality, I guess, like at the beginning of the year, they're supposed to be a stronger team, but like. I mean, they're one game away from being tied with Misfits, and Misfits have won every game that they have played late game in.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, I mean, but I mean, just in general, like heading into this week, I was expecting SK to go 0-2. So, in that regard. But still, it's very funny. It's very sad at the same time for this man. But
hey, I mean, it's comfort Vigilius, and Gadget gave us a lot of retweets. So there you go.
He did give us a lot of it. And I mean, yeah, I don't know. I guess if you're down 1-6 right now, maybe you start playing for comfort and hoping that it does something, or I don't know.
On BDS, I'm curious, by the way, because BDS was shit again this week, right?
Yep.
When Grabs was on Roccat back in 2017, I think. Yeah, 2017. Yeah. He was kind of robbed of Coach of the Split, but basically his Roccat only beat like top teams and lost to everyone else, and it's low key happening again, you know. And they didn't make playoffs, but like they were like beating Fnatic and G2 and all this shit, and it's like how is he? It's I mean, it's happening again. They almost went 2-0 in the Fnatic G2 week, right?
And now they
haven't beaten anyone else. It's like, how are you doing this? Do you spend weeks prepping for the next top team and just don't prep for anyone else in that time? Or something? The drills are all about that top team.
Maybe it's for the players that it feels like, okay, we're gonna lose anyway. Let's play more freely against these top teams. You know, that they feel less pressure. But that's actually a thing where you're like, okay, you know, we've got nothing to lose against this top team. We're just gonna play a bit more freely and see what works, because that might be a thing where they play against a team that they're in contention with for not being lost. They feel all this pressure, like, oh shit, we cannot lose against these guys. It might actually be a thing that's actually a factor that happens. But
I love the implication that what's happening in their losses is Grabs is really try hard coaching, and what's happening in their wins is that Grabs is like, I'm gonna put my feet up now. You do whatever the fuck you want.
I mean, I am saying that this might be a mental thing for the players, but I will say that he was against was Fnatic, right? He just said I said this on the last show as well, where he said Synchro, hey Synchro, what do you want to play? And Synchro said Skarner. He locked it in, and he hadn't played it. So maybe there is actually
no prep win, prep lose. Okay.
Yeah, I mean they still have Mad Lions and Rogue in week 4 to play, which is the roundup for the first round robin.
Perhaps if you're watching, I thought that you prepped for those teams, right? He's the one. He's the one that thinks you're prepped.
I mean, we're just gonna see some very niche pick again, maybe from Synchro. You know, he's gonna say like, you know what, this game, I'm looking in. I don't know, like what's a super niche jungler right now?
Arzand played Yumi jungle in Challenger
Oh
recently.
no. Okay, yeah, I recently tried Veigar jungle, and it was not very good times. But who knows what they do there? Yeah, I think
Singe jungle is viable, and there are a lot of tanks in the meta. Singe jungle is viable. There's a lot of tanks in the meta, and it counts as Yumi.
Yeah.
Just saying. You're thinking about it, Shinkrov, right?
Master
Next
Yi,
time
here
Grabs
he
is like,
comes.
what do you want to play?
Master Yi,
Boom.
here he comes. Yeah. I mean, Master Yi did get some buffs, right? Didn't he? I think he did. I'm not sure if they'll already be reverted or what patch they're playing on. Inspired played Kane in the LCS this weekend, so that might be something.
I struggle to think of Kane as a niche pick, to be honest. But yeah, no. I mean, it should be good into such heavy HP though. It should be good, right? Kane should just, but I think in situations where people could go Kane, they just keep going Viego now, because Viego's gank setups are just way better, right? And honestly, once the snowball starts happening in a team fight, Viego's the best champion.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, let's go to best in the West then.
Oh yeah, I forgot about this part.
Yeah, I forgot the part which the show is named after.
Yes, I always just assume the show's referring to me. So.
Oh yeah. No. I would be doing a show with Dom and Thorin for that, obviously. It's just joke. I think I'm hovering between two top laners actually. Wunder and Odo Amne had very good performances both. Last weekend, I am inclined to give it to Wunder to give him his props because I think many people are. I'm not sure if they're like not high on the guy or whatever, but Odo has become kind of the people's champion at this point. I see it everywhere. Whenever he is in possibility for MVP vote, he will get it regardless because people either remember that he never got it like a while ago, and then when he finally got it, they had this whole confetti thing, or it's because he's so actively grumpy and salty that it's just funny, and he's heavily leaning into this as well. And I give him all the like have at it, guy, like dude, like you've been around for so long, and finally you get your time in the spotlight. Like take it, you've deserved it, you've earned it. It's fine for me. And obviously he did play super well, but I think I'm gonna give it to Wunder because I think he at this point is still underappreciated for how solidly he is playing. I mean, we gave him the whole praise routine a bit early in the show, right? About why he's playing so why we think of him so highly at this point. Might be a bit boring, like a Gragas and an Ornn game. You know, it's not specifically highlight champions, but he made them highlight champions, and he was in week 2 already. The player who kept them in the game, especially against BDS for so long with very creative ults. And he's doing again, he's finding very creative ults on champions that aren't thought of as being very creative. So,
I think I'll give it to Wunder as well, to be honest.
All right.
Yeah. Can't think of a better player, to be honest, to give it to. It's so weird to me that none of the mid laners stand out to me this week, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it speaks almost to how heavily teams are playing on early groupings now, right? That individually no mid laner is actually standing out.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I definitely give it to Wunder.
Cool. Well, that's a very easy selection then. I guess that's the episode. So thank you everybody for watching this show. Let know in the comments below what you thought of last week's matches, and if you agree or disagree with any of the points that we made. Who do you think was best in the West? I'm not sure if I've asked that before, but let's ask it now. If you've managed to watch it to the end, let us know who you think is the best in the West. And next week there's not going to be a show because there's no LEC, so it's a bit hard for us to talk about. Yeah.
Okay.
But
no, but we could do an ERL show, Tom. Come on.
Yeah. Okay. And I would have I know like a few ERL teams, obviously, but it would be very hard to narrow down who we want to talk about and how we're going to transition to things. So that might be like next year, you know, if we've gone fully monetized and we'll be like, hi guys, this is Best in the West, sponsored by Alienware and Red Bull and whatnot. Then
wait.
Yeah. Okay. Oh shit. Oh crap.
Technically, with LEC down, doesn't the Best in the West just become NA?
Oh no.
We just do one NA episode for fun.
I don't want to do an NA episode because
Okay.
it would require me first of all to destroy my sleep schedule, and also I would have to talk about like Immortals, and don't want to talk about Immortals. So.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I watched it. I don't want to talk about it.
Whoa.
Yeah. if
Whoa.
you didn't want to talk
What's
about
going on over there?
if you don't want to talk about SK, you don't want to talk about Immortals. So
Gotcha,
on that
gotcha.
note, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We won't be back next week, but we will be back in the week after. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.